and you're set to go.
All right, thank you. So good morning, commissioners. My name is Jake Johnstone. I'm the Southwest Region Manager for the Oregon Water Resource Department. We're going to go around here and do some introductions of the folks on the line with Water Resource Department first, and then Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then if you folks would be so kind as to introduce yourselves as well, that would be wonderful. So again, Jake Johnstone, turn it over to Ivan Gall.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ivan Gall. I'm with the Water Resources Department here in Salem. I'm the division administrator for our field services division, so I work with our water masters and region managers across the state. Ann?
Good morning. My name is Ann Hayden Lesmeister, and I'm an in-stream flow specialist in ODFW's Water Quality and Quantity Program.
I am Danette Becerra. I am our statewide water policy coordinator for Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife.
And then I believe that's it. Nirvana Cook, who is nice enough from our director's office, the executive assistant who put this together and scheduled. Thank you, Nirvana. She's going to be helping us if we have any technical problems. And then we also have another water master from District 14 who's on the line, Scott Cicilline, who will also be kind of there just for assistance. Commissioner Main, would you please introduce yourself?
Bob Main, Coos County Commissioner.
Thank you, sir.
And current board chair.
I'm sorry.
And Bob is also current board chair.
Ah, copy that.
He's being too modest.
We rotate every year, so it's no big deal.
And I'm Melissa Cribbins. I'm the other county commissioner that's on the call today, and Commissioner Swede had a conflict and so couldn't join us at the last minute. But we will fill him in.
I see Tom and Jill there too.
Oh, sorry, yes.
So I'm Jill Rolfe, Coos County Planning Director.
Commissioner Tom Kress from Douglas County, and I want to thank Coos County for allowing us to be on with it.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
I think that leaves me. My name is Joshua Shackley. I'm the Planning Director with Douglas County.
Yeah, and thank you, Joshua, for helping coordinate getting the commissioners on, and thanks everyone for making time to be here today to answer some questions. Now, before I dive into things, I have a PowerPoint presentation that we gave to Curry County. If folks have already reviewed that and feel that it would be redundant, I'm happy to bypass it. Otherwise, I'm happy to dive into it. It'd probably take about 15-20 minutes. ODFW has a similar presentation in length, I think maybe a little bit shorter. But I leave it up to the group. If you feel that that would be beneficial to go through those again, then that's totally fine.
For me, I think we have some folks on that haven't seen it before. I reviewed it last week.
Okay, that's good enough for me. I will go through the presentation. Like I said, I'll go through it rather quickly, and then hopefully we can free up the rest of the period of time here for questions and answers. I'll do our OWRD presentation, and then I will turn it over to Ann to do the ODFW component. So give me a second to try and present the right screen. Let's see. I'm going to do, and there it is. And then if folks can just kind of let me know when you can see the presentation, it should say in-stream water right application process.
It's up.
All right.
It's up.
All right, let's see if I can advance it. All right. Did it advance to today's discussion for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So today's discussion, we're gonna go over some basic principles of in-stream water rights, the application process, how we estimate natural stream flow, how we evaluate the requested amounts versus what ends up getting granted as part of the in-stream application, the impact it has to our water availability and reporting system, and the water right application process. So OAR Chapter 690, Division 77 is what gives us guidance on in-stream water right applications. and the in-stream water right process. That was a legislative concept in 1987 that made it a beneficial use for in-stream purposes. Prior to that, our beneficial uses were primarily out-of-stream uses like your irrigation, domestic, industrial, that kind of thing. This implemented in-stream water rights law and set equitable allocations and established management objectives. Out-of-stream uses shall not factor in determining the amount of the in-stream water right, and the in-stream water right amount shall not exceed the estimated natural stream flow. I'll get into that in a little bit. So one of the take-homes is OWRD evaluates in-stream water rights based on natural stream flow, not water available. Another important component here is, and this comes up a lot, we get these questions regarding in-stream water rights. Subsection 6, in-stream water rights do not take away or impact any legally established right to use water having an earlier priority date than the in-stream right. This is a water right like any other water right, and with prior appropriation, it means it's junior to the senior water rights, and it does not have sway over them in a call for water scenario or a regulatory scenario. This was identified recently as a priority in the 2017 Integrated Water Resource Strategy, and has a slide that goes in a little more detail on what the IWRS is, but it was a multi-agency and public outreach cooperative project to try and address current and future water management needs in the state of Oregon. Natural stream flow estimations. So there's a 2002 Cooper report that the Water Resource Department put together to establish equal and natural stream flows. The OWR standard is new in-stream water rights less than or equal to the natural median stream flow. The median stream flow has been estimated for 2,300 basins, a little over 2,300 basins in the state, and it's estimated developed using long-term stream gauge data and regional regression via the Cooper document. And so what does that look like in practice? This chart here kind of gives you an idea of what our modelers in our surface water section will look at. So you have the 50% natural stream flow. We'll call that 50% exceedance. You'll hear that term a lot. That's what's used in our water availability. And it basically says, 5 out of 10 years, this is how much water you're going to see. So it's our expected average of flow in a system. So the requested in-stream water right is the yellow line, and I apologize if that's difficult to see. And the allowed in-stream water right is the red line. So you're going to see that that fits the model a little more accurately there in a couple of the months. So what we're talking about today, so there are 158 applications, in-stream water right applications submitted in the Rogue, Umpqua, and South Coast on November 30th, 2020. At this point, 100 were evaluated for hydraulically correct basins. And what that means is we utilized our Cooper method and we looked at the water availability and reporting system. And if the in-stream water right fell within an already established water availability basin, or a WAB, we refer to it as, then we were able to look at the actual requested flow, like the chart before showed, this one, versus the estimated natural flow, and kick back to the next step, which was an initial review. And I'll go into that a little more in detail. But so we have 100 that have received an initial review. There are 58 that are still pending. Those 58 are because there is no established water availability basin in that location. Our hydrographers have to do that process, use the model, and create one to come up with an estimated natural stream flow. So this is an example of a nested watershed in a larger watershed. So this is Williams Creek, a tributary to the Umpqua system. And so they're looking at, for an in-stream request on Williams Creek, our hydrographers are going to look at water available in that watershed, and then it nests in and affects the downstream watershed. So the impact to water availability. Once the application receives the initial review, the in-stream water data are entered into WARS, our water availability system. The in-stream water right monthly values are subtracted from water availability. So water available equals natural stream flow minus consumptive use minus in-stream requirement. In-stream water rights from new watersheds that were delineated are added to WARS into their larger WABs. So that was the example with the last slide there. and that's done as they are completed by our hydrographers. And those are, again, for the ones that don't have a water availability basin. The in-stream water right application process. So application review process laid out in OAR 69310 and 690 Division 77. It's a process similar to any other water right application review. And in-stream water rights can be filed by Department of Environmental Quality, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Oregon Parks and Rec. So the application flow, the application is filed, the completeness, determination, and flow evaluation are conducted, and the initial review is issued. For those 100, again, that already had a water availability basin, that was January 19th was when the initial review went out, and that starts a 30-day public comment period. Comments are reviewed, and it can take some time. It's an opportunity for dialogue between the parties who submitted comments and the applicant, with OWRD kind of as the intermediary there. And then there is a proposed final order issued, which starts a 45-day protest period. If there are no protests, the water right would move to certification. If there is a protest, the settlement can be explored with the parties, the applicant and the party who files the protest. And if an agreement can't be reached, a contested case hearing may be needed to get to a final order and possibly a certificate. If settlement is reached, most likely a certificate is issued with the final order. And that is it for myself. And I will turn it over to Ann for her presentation. I will just put a note there. I'm happy to send this as a PDF to anyone on the line who has yet to see it. And the last slide after my question slide has just the handy links page, which can get you to our public comment page. It can also get you to ODFW's homepage or some other pages on our end. So, Ann.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jake. And I'm going to start to share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see that? Excellent. Okay, well, like Jake was saying, I am happy to share this. And also back in November, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, we also did a public meeting with a more extensive PowerPoint. And so I'm also happy to share that one in PDF format. I've shared that with anybody that's requested, but I'm happy to do that again. So I will keep things brief here because I know you're probably ready to get on with the question and answers. So first of all, I just want to repeat the mission of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and that's to protect and enhance Oregon's fish and wildlife and their habitats for use and enjoyment by present and future generations. And applying for in-stream water rights is one way that ODFW works to achieve this mission. The Integrated Water Resources Strategy was developed by a broad group of stakeholders with public input through meetings and comments. It was first adopted by the Water Resources Commission in 2012 and updated in 2017. And it provides a blueprint for meeting the state's in and out of stream water needs. As stated in the document, the fundamental purpose is to better understand and meet Oregon's water needs, both consumptive and environmental, while including water quantity, water quality, and ecosystem needs. The Water Resources Strategy is a suite of recommended actions that specifically includes better understanding in-stream water needs. And in that document, ODFW was specifically directed to determine flows to support in-stream needs and to establish additional in-stream water rights where needed to protect flows. Additionally, I just wanted to review some state and agency policy that governs ODFW's process for applying for in-stream water rights. It is state policy to prevent the serious depletion of any indigenous species. And as Jake said, this places protection, the 1987 Act placed protection of in-stream flows on the same legal status as any other water right. Our agency rules dictate where and how we can apply for in-stream water rights. So it is our agency's policy to obtain an in-stream water right on every waterway that exhibits fish and wildlife values. And our rules for in-stream water rights provide guidelines specifically for developing the flow recommendations and the reach designations where we apply. Just wanted to talk briefly about the extended benefits of in-stream water rights beyond benefiting fish and wildlife populations and the humans that enjoy them. There's water quality, cultural values, navigation, climate change resiliency, commercial and recreational fisheries, as well as water and wildlife-based recreation and tourism. And so I'm not going to read this slide or go into it in detail, but Oregon's largest commercial fisheries, the ex-vessel values are shown here. So that is certainly an important economic benefit of commercial fisheries in this region where we're currently applying for in-stream water rights, as well as the benefits of recreation. This is a new study that was recently released that shows the benefit of outdoor recreation to communities along the South Coast and in the 3 basins where we are applying. So like I said, if you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me if they come to you after this. And also, I am happy to share this if you would like. And that's all I have for now. If you'd like to move on with questions, thank you. All right, did I stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, you did. Thanks, Ann.
Great, thank you.
So we have a small enough group here. I don't know that we need to go with the formality of the raise hand function, but if we get to a point where we're talking over each other, if you kind of roll your mouse over the bottom bar, you'll see a thing that's a smiley face that says reactions. If you click on that, there is a raise hand function, which I've just done. And then you can lower the hand as well. But I think, again, I think we have a small enough group that we may not need that, but it is there as a tool. So I would open it up to questions from the commissioners or the planning directors.
Question for me. Well, I have lots of questions, but on your, what do you call it, Cooper stream flow study? What is the date span of that study?
What is, I'm sorry, the what?
Date span. How many years was the study conducted?
That I don't know. I can definitely follow up with you to answer that question.
Okay, so, okay, all righty. So
generally, Commissioner Main, generally when we're doing hydraulic modeling, they'll look at 30 years of record. So I think that the record that was encompassed to pull up the data and to create the study would probably be 30 years of hydraulic record. I do not know the exact date span of the study, how long it took, but I'm happy to follow up with you on that.
Calling the Cooper study, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is this water priority for ODFW going to be across the state? In other words, ODFW wants the remaining in-stream water rights, right? I'm on the right track here. I see a head shaking up and down, yes.
And?
Yes, so it is ODFW's policy to apply for in-stream water rights on streams of the state exhibiting fish and wildlife values. And we reinitiated that process really around 2017, and that was based on that directive in the integrated water resources strategy. Again, like I said in the slideshow, our rules do dictate where and the methods that we can use. And so not all streams in the state have that. And so there are streams where we do additional studies or in the process of doing that. And also we try to do it regionally so that we can do the appropriate outreach with communities to let them know that these things are going to be happening.
So which areas of the state is that happening?
Well, in 2019, new in-stream water rights were certificated for the North and Mid-Coast basins, and those were the first ones that were certificated that ODFW had applied for in 20 years. And now we're focusing on the Southwest region of the state, which are WRD basins, Rogue, Umpqua, and South Coast. And that's what we're focusing on right now.
Willamette Valley?
We have not focused on the Willamette Valley yet. There are different reasons for that, but one is, of course, the current reallocation that's going on is going to affect that. And so we're waiting for that process before we move on to look at in-stream flows in that part of the state.
I'm not familiar with reallocation. What does that entail?
That's the process, the reallocation of water from the dam system in the Willamette Valley. So that's actually kind of a federal process, federal and state process that is ongoing. And I'm not an expert on that, but it's the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the EPA, and various other state agencies, including the Water Resources Department, are involved in that.
So nothing in Eastern Oregon either?
Not at this time.
Okay.
And I don't know the timeline of when that will be.
Okay.
Or if I could just add to that just briefly. You know, Ann had mentioned that we're doing them kind of regionally and by basin. And, you know, part of the reasoning for that is the outreach and working with local groups, but also we don't want to overwhelm water resources with large numbers of applications at one time. So we're being considerate of their staff time in processing these applications. And we also did apply for new in-stream water rights in the Sandy and Hood basins in 2016, I think it was. You know, we do have a strategy to look across the state, and, you know, by basin, we'll get there eventually. So we're just starting the process and moving through them.
Also, on this Cooper study, do you know what period of the year they took the stream flow?
Commissioner Main, this is Ivan Gall here in Salem. It's year-round flows, and the 30-year period of time was 1958 through 1987. That period of time was chosen because a number of reasons, but one of the primary ones, there happened to be an unusually large amount of gauging stations that were installed during that period of time. The study was finalized in 2002. Our staff in hydrographics today are looking at updating that 30-year period of time and using some more modern records, but they may be incomplete in some basins because some of the gauging stations that were operational decades ago are no longer operational. But additionally, we have new gauging stations that are operational in other parts of the state as well.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner, that document, the Cooper document, is for water resources. It's a tool for them to estimate their natural flow. It's different than our process that we go through to recommend flows for fish and wildlife. So I just wanted to clarify that for you.
Okay. And what does out of stream mean? On Jake's presentation, he said out of stream.
Yeah, so out of stream uses are more of your traditional water right uses. So your irrigation, your industrial, your commercial, your municipal uses. Those are out of stream channel uses.
Oh, they're taking water out of the stream for their use, not sinking a well separate from the stream.
Correct. No, that's not what I was referring to.
Okay, thanks.
Hmm?
So just from my understanding, can we go through this theoretically? So ODFW will apply or has applied. And so that won't affect any prior appropriated rights, correct? So imagine I'm a farmer and I've got, you know, my irrigation rights, but then all of the water will be essentially appropriated if somebody came after and wanted to get water rights in that stream. Is that right?
So to
After
your first,
the date of the application.
Yeah, Commissioner Cribbins, to the first half of your question, no, this will not affect a senior water right when it comes to priority in regulation or along those lines.
Okay.
To the latter part of your question, the water available for future allocation will include, debited from that number will also be the in-stream water right. You know, there are 158 of these, and there will be somewhat of a case by case here. There may still be water available in certain areas and not in other areas.
Okay. So if there's not enough to fill the ODFW water right that they're asking, if a senior user gave up their water right for one reason or another, then that would go to fill ODFW's in-stream water right before it would go to a new application, correct? Does that make sense?
So that's a good question. I would unpack it a little bit, Commissioner Cribbins, in that the in-stream water rights, when they're applied for, are based off of an estimated natural stream flow. So that's not including what's already been debited from the system for other water rights, for example. You know, if a water right were forfeited and or canceled voluntarily by the holder of the water right, essentially that water would go back into the system. Now, having there been additional water rights issued since then, in this case, an in-stream water right, there would most likely, or there may not be, water available for future allocation, depending on the rate and what was available in that system. Ivan, I'm happy to be corrected or clarified on that one if I misspoke.
No, I think Jake's characterized it pretty well. We don't know. I don't have enough familiarity with the 158 new applications in every stream. And as Jake pointed out, in about 58 of those applications, we still have to do a water availability analysis internal in our agency, because the areas that ODFW applied for those didn't fall at what we call the pour point or the bottom end of one of these water availability basins, where we'd already done the calculations in Rick Cooper's 2002 study there. So that work's going to be ongoing and take the next several months for staff to get through that exercise. But fundamentally, the filing of these in-stream water rights as they go through the process and upon approval, well, upon issuance of the initial review process that Jake was talking about, those flow amounts will be debited from each month of that water availability analysis. And they do have impacts to the available amount of water that's out there. Doesn't mean that no water is available any longer. In some cases that may be true, in other cases it may not be true. It's going to depend on the basin and the amount applied for.
So when you did the North Coast and the Mid Coast, did you find that it was generally true or generally not true?
I'm not familiar with the individual applications up there and the results to the water availability.
Okay.
So is this a finite amount of water being requested by ODFW, or is it on a sliding scale depending on the amount of water left after the existing water rights?
ODFW doesn't apply for their monthly in-stream value. So they're applying for 12 values for each in-stream water right. Each one of those values lines up with each of the calendar months. And as you can imagine, there's a higher application amount in the wintertime months when more water is available to mimic the natural conditions. And there's usually less applied for during the drier summer months to mimic the natural conditions. Their application amounts are based on their own tools and requirements and analyses. How much water is available this month in this stream reach for this species for whatever conditions ODFW wants to see met. That analysis, I believe, Ann, is largely not considering how much water is A, physically there today, or B, necessarily what our 50% exceedance flows or median values are going to look like. They're somewhat aligned because our median flows are results of real stream flow gauging and are a historical look at what would have been there pre-development time. But it's our own internal analysis that's going to limit ODFW's ultimate amounts that are issued for the in-stream water rights. We're not allowed to issue more water than is available at that 50% exceedance flow like Jake outlined there. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Well, I guess what you said is they're going to have a finite amount based on whatever month we're talking about.
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't vary from year to year or part of the month to part of the month. It's going to be for the month of January, regardless of the year, it's going to be a set value for a particular in-stream water right there.
So let's say I'm a industrial user of some sort. In a high stream flow, let's say like now in the wintertime, can I store water for low stream flow usage later on, let's say August or September?
You can. So if you came in with a new application for a new storage right, we would use the same water availability model that we're using to look at ODFW's applications with to look at your application. And a storage right comes in under the same 50% exceedance criteria. And we would look at how much water is available on a volumetric. So how many acre feet is available in the month of January for your application. And we would be able, if there's water available, we would be able to issue you storage for some months of the year for that particular purpose.
Okay. And for Ann, I'm reviewing your meeting with Curry County. You said you were going to get back to them on the amount needed for fish, I think was the question. Were you able to find out?
I'm not sure of the question that you're referring to, or can you provide a little more context?
Well, my Remy's Hazery, I saw it last week, and that's a whole eon ago when your stuff was coming by on a conveyor belt. But it seemed like they want to know how much water was needed for fish when you apply for this water right. How much would there be for a minimum or maximum for fish based on any time of the year versus maybe just a application for a shotgun approach, bad term, but anyway, for just taking the remaining water right that's in the stream. That make any sense what I said?
I think so, and I will answer, and then if you have additional questions based on my answer, then we can just follow up on that. I did want to make a quick clarification. ODFW, we do have rules, and so those rules determine both where we apply for in-stream water rights and the amount of flow that we apply for. And it's actually on a half-month basis, so you will see 24 amounts over the course of the year. But like Ivan said, those don't change from year to year. That's the amount that we're requesting every year on a half-month basis. And so where we apply, like I said, is dictated in our rules, and it has to be based on field studies, some combination of field studies and/or field studies combined with model data. And the flows must be based on habitat criteria. And so that has been done for every in-stream water right that we're applying for. And so one of the ways how that is done is to estimate fish habitat. We look at habitat available over a range of discharges, so from low to high flows. And the habitat preferences vary for different species and for each of their life stages. So that resulting flow that you're seeing is a species life stage specific flow target. So the optimum flow target for a species, like Jake was saying, might actually be higher than that 50% exceedance probability or the median flow that might be expected in a stream. And we do understand that. And so even on our end, ODFW, we do cap that. So if that field determined or field and model based determined flow is much greater than the stream flow that would be expected at that time of year, we typically cap that at the 30% exceedance probability. So that's a higher flow than the 50%, but it's not the highest flow that could occur at that time of year.
Is it species specific?
They are species specific studies, and the particular method used here focuses on anadromous fish.
Okay, other than warm water.
That's right.
I wanted to add one thing too, if I may. There's really, I think, getting at maybe Commissioner Cribben's question as well. There's kind of three scenarios on water availability. One is where our in-stream water right would use up the remaining allocation that's available, and that's the situation that you're probably concerned with most. The other one is our in-stream water rights would be subtracted from water available, and there would still be water available for future uses. And then the third one is in a lot of areas of the state, and particularly in the summer months, water already is not available. So our in-stream water rights aren't going to impact any future allocation because it's already not available. So, I don't know specifically for these applications how those pan out for each one. That's something that, will come probably at a later time once it's further processed. But for the most part, I would say water's not available in the summer, but there might still be water available in the winter for those storage uses. Not always, but that seems to be the general case across the state. The coast is a little bit different in that with rainfall and whatnot, but hope that it explains it maybe a little bit differently.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just kind of for context here, you know, the Water Resource Department, we accept water right applications for any number of use in or out of stream use. And just in the terms of simplification, it is not uncommon for folks to apply for their shoot for the moon application. You know, they want 200 acre-foot reservoir, that's what they're applying for. The application process, including the comment period and possible protest period, and the evaluation of what's available in our model is how we get to what was allowed for that specific water right. And you know, that's the most simplest terms to look at it. In this case, ODFW, based off of their studies of fish habitat, said this is the threshold we think is necessary to maintain a certain level of quality for fish habitat. And then they applied for it. And then our department reviews it based off of what's available, and then turns around and we go into the process of public comment, et cetera, et cetera. Any other questions from?
If I might,
Yes, sir.
So in the Umpqua system, you're asking for 114, which is, my understanding is virtually all we have left, if any. We have no low flow water rights left. So this is wintertime flow. My first part of my question is the Department of Fish and Wildlife, why do you feel that's necessary when water doesn't seem to be an issue in the wintertime anyway? So I'd like that question answered first, and then I have the second part of a question.
Okay, so you're asking why we would apply in the winter? Is that the question?
Well, yeah, why when we don't seem to have a water problem, that is when you're wanting to do that. And taking all that we have left, it appears to me that it has nothing to do with water flow. It has to do with not allowing for any more, you know, any kind of development whatsoever.
Well, in-stream flows are a beneficial use, and you know, we argue that they are important economically as well for a number of reasons. And so I had walked through how we arrive at those numbers. And so that's what dictates how we arrive at those numbers. One thing that's important to remember, I think, with in-stream water rights is that they can be approved for amounts greater than what OWRD, the Water Resources Department, estimates is available. So that would constrain out of stream uses or those consumptive uses. But that's not a factor in determining an in-stream water right. And those allocations are based on natural stream flow. And one of the reasons we do this, even in basins that are already completely over allocated, meaning that if someone was to apply for an out of stream use, it would not be approved because water's not available. It's still important for us because these provide needed guidelines, and they provide a goal for achieving in-stream flows to support a variety of identified public uses. And when we set these biological flow targets, it helps guide agencies and various other collaborators in long-term basin and planning and restoration efforts.
So the second part of my question then would be to the Water Resources Board. So if you're an industrial timberland owner and you don't have a senior water right, and you need to develop ponds for fire control or any of that thing, or develop springs, this could potentially preclude that.
Yeah, that would be, there's a potential for that. Again, it would depend on the water available in that particular system.
Well, I mean, let's just call it what it is. I don't think there's going to be any water available after this. That's the goal. We need to make sure we understand that. And any housing development within a quarter-mile stream, we're not going to be able to sink a well.
Yeah, so I'll defer to Ivan actually for the well component, because he's far more versed in groundwater. He used to lead our groundwater section. But again, and I hear your concern, Commissioner Kress. The water may not be available for further allocation if that model and the in-stream that's granted takes away the remainder of what's available. That's a fair statement, but Ivan can explain the well component better than I can.
Yeah, Commissioner Kress, Ivan here in Salem. So I think there is a lot of misinformation out there around how these in-stream water rights impact groundwater uses. So in Oregon, there's essentially two categories of groundwater use. We have exempt uses. So these are uses where an individual or a business can drill a well and they can begin using limited amounts of groundwater without having to have a groundwater right. They're exempt from a permitting process. And those exempt uses include single or group domestic up to 15,000 gallons a day. So that will take care of your 30 home subdivision, maybe 40 homes, depending on how much they can serve. They're allowed to develop a ½ acre of lawn and non-commercial garden per exemption. There's a 5,000 gallon per day commercial or industrial exemption from that groundwater system. And then stock water is exempt from that well. There's also some other exemptions that are less common, downhole heat exchange, things like that. The other category of groundwater is one that's not exempt from permitting. So these would be larger groundwater uses that are going to require a groundwater right here in Oregon. Industrial would be one. Municipal would be another one that's common. If there was going to be a very large housing development and it needed to be on a groundwater system, they probably would require a permit as well if they were going to be serving domestic water to more than 30 or 40 homes. Or alternatively, if they wanted to irrigate landscaping in excess of a ½ an acre there, they would apply for groundwater right. That application goes through a review process here in Salem. And one of the criteria against which it is judged is kind of the amount of hydraulic connection between the proposed groundwater wells and nearby surface water. So it's very common in Oregon to have your groundwater system hydraulically connected to surface water. And if you're within 1 mile, if that well is within 1 mile of a surface water body and it's hydraulically connected, then the application rate, let's say they're applying for 25 gallons a minute, that's compared to some flows on that surface water body. It's compared to the 80% exceedance flow, which is going to be a smaller number than the 50% exceedance flow that we're talking about here. That's an amount of water that would be available 8 out of 10 years as an example. And it's also the application rate for the groundwater right is compared to any in-stream water rights on that reach of hydraulically connected surface water. And so there is an analysis that's done to make sure that the proposed groundwater use isn't going to have a substantial impact on that surface water. And that's where an in-stream water right comes into play. So I hope that answers your question. It's a lot more complicated when you start dealing with the surface water groundwater connection issue and the analysis that goes into it.
Well, it does answer my question. It looks like it'd be a heck of a lot easier if we had 114 of them left available to people.
Well, the presence of an in-stream water right really isn't the deciding factor for a groundwater right. It's the size of the monthly values that really come into play.
Again, I just have a hard time understanding if you get to a water flow that's anywhere close to summer flow in the winter, I'm guessing junior water rights are going to be turned off anyway. I don't understand the issue that in the winter, the Fish and Wildlife thinks they need to have, restrict the water usage. I don't understand it. You've said it, but I still don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, let me try and kind of rephrase, at least from my perspective here. Right now, if there are no in-stream water rights on a large water body, let's use the North Umpqua River as a good example. There are in-streams there, but then fundamentally we could continue to issue storage rights during the winter months until it effectively goes dry in the winter. And so is that likely to happen? Probably not. You don't have enough good storage sites to take that amount of water. But what ODFW is effectively doing here is trying to protect the necessary flows for the fish that they're trying to be protective of. And that's what this is fundamentally doing.
Can I add a piece to that? I'm kind of getting the impression that you feel that we're intentionally taking the rest of the flow, maybe, but our requirements in applying for in-stream water rights are based on scientific studies for what the fish need. So we're not even really considering water availability in our initial assessments. We are doing that study, we're finding a flow value, and that's what we're applying for. Winter flows in particular are really special to a lot of life history requirements for fish. What we're applying for is really just the base flow that's necessary, the minimum amount. There's also, other flow values that are, the peak flows and whatnot that are contributing to channel maintenance and fish habitat that are vital to fish survival. And those are something we're not even considering in our in-stream water rights currently. It's just that lower level.
So could you send me those studies you just referred to? Danette?
They're studies that are outlined in our rules that we have to base our in-stream water rights on.
So you could send those to me somehow, electronically or whatever?
And the methods are also outlined in the applications, which are available on the Water Resources Department's system. So if you go into each of those applications or each requested in-stream water right, you actually can access the application, the map, and it has those studies request that are listed in there as well.
Okay, so you'll send me the link.
Commissioner, or either commissioner there in Coos County or in Douglas County, your local water masters would be available to sit down with you or your staff and
Our local water masters in Salem.
Yeah, your local water master is now in Douglas County as well. I understand that, Commissioner Main.
About once every 6 months, so.
She was just over a few days ago. Oh, in fairness.
I'm happy to share like I said, I have a slide that has links, Commissioner Main. I'm happy to share with you the initial review for these in-stream water right applications. I'll follow up and send that over. I'll send it to the group. And then I'll also send that slide regarding links that may be useful. Happy to do so.
Would that include that Cooper study you referred to?
I could get you access to the Cooper study, I believe. It's rather lengthy. I think it's about 178 pages.
That's okay.
Okay. It's more for the conveyor belt, huh, Commissioner?
Yeah. I used to be an analyst in a former life, so.
Okay.
So I have a question, and this may be more for Ivan. We have a lot of surface water and a lot of wells that are near surface water. So I was just wondering if you could send something to us, so if somebody asked, we would have more information on that side of how you kind of calculate, how this maybe would impact, if it would impact wells when they're really close to surface water, because that's basically what we're going to get at.
Are you, again, Jill, are you looking for exempt wells that don't need a permit?
Residential wells. So for instance, if somebody comes in and they, in the forest zone, they have to have a form that says that the well meets the standards that's in the statute, which I believe is for exemption. So we have to have the water master sign a form saying that it's exempt, and that's where we're probably going to get most of our land use questions. Will that affect that process? And if so, how does it affect the process?
Yeah, so again, the presence of an in-stream water right or lack of an in-stream water right on a stream has no impact on exempt wells, none. So that, as far as that particular category of folks, which is the bulk of them on the South Coast, there really is no impact from these in-stream water rights. So the filing of an in-stream water right isn't going to impact someone's ability to drill an exempt well for a small commercial use or their domestic use or group domestic use there at all. It's only going to become a factor if someone luckily hits a larger quantity of groundwater and wants to get a larger groundwater right on it. That's where it may come into to be a factor, depending on distance and a lot of other issues. So
I'm just looking for maybe a memo from you that says this is the applicable rule that applies, so that if somebody asks, we can send them to it.
Jill, I think I could share with you ORS 537, 545, and I could also share with you our Aqua book, which is some kind of, it's an informational pamphlet we have. I'm happy to follow up with you and do that.
Okay.
Yeah, 537, 545 is what outlines what's allowed under that domestic exemption. But I totally hear your point. I mean, this is a lot of what we get as water masters in the field is how will X in the stream affect my, my domestic well? And to Ivan's point, it's not going to. Our big concerns regarding water wells is that they meet construction standards. And currently there isn't a setback from the stream body for these. The 1 mile that Ivan was talking about is specifically for something that exceeds that ORS 537, 545. But I'll send that to you as well. I'll just include it in what I follow up with the group on.
Okay. Yeah, that would be very helpful because if that's something that we can post on our website that we can direct people to when they ask.
Copy that.
Ivan or Jake, do you want to talk about human consumption rights as well, and maybe how that might be applicable and how you're processing those?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that part.
Oh, I was wondering if you wanted to talk about human consumption rights and how Water Resources is processing those in relation to in-stream water rights. I don't know if that would be helpful additional information or not.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it, and then Ivan can jump in and kind of help me through the nuance there. So, in certain circumstances where there may be some kind of hardship, there's no legitimate groundwater available, someone's attempted to drill some wells and came up empty, there is a process through the department where someone may apply for a human consumption right. It's a small rate, it's 0.005 CFS or cubic feet per second. And this isn't an outside watering thing. It's not a large consumptive use, but the intent behind it is to try and facilitate an avenue for public good and public benefit there for a homeowner or an individual who has no other option and has exhausted their resources. Maybe trucking water is not feasible given their distance from a municipality or a legitimate trucking location. And in being that far from the municipality, they might not have the opportunity to use the municipal system. That's kind of a case by case, and it's something that has been utilized in certain situations and circumstances. For example, the Rogue River has a scenic water designation, and there's a certain component of that allows for human consumption rights, to be filed for over time that kind of meet these circumstances. Ivan, do you have anything to add on that, or?
I don't, Jake.
Okay.
So another question, I'm only aware of a series of in-stream gauges on the main stem and the South Fork of the Coquille. So how do you determine the stream flow for streams without that? You interpolate between them or what?
So that's a great question, Commissioner Main. I started my time with the Water Resource Department as a field technician measuring stream flow, which I miss greatly. It is a wonderful, peaceful pursuit. But there was a time when the department had a far more extensive gauging station network. I believe the Coos Watershed Council has inherited some of those gauges, but there was a time when we had far more gauges on systems throughout the state. Having more of those gauges allowed us to help create the record that went into the Cooper report and the Cooper study. But to your point, when there is no gauge, the hydrographers will take a similar basin that has been gauged and studied, and they will do a comparison. And in those, they'll have similar, aspect, soils, vegetation, that kind of thing that they give considerations to. And then sometimes we also have miscellaneous measurements. Our department makes miscellaneous measurements on systems that are not gauged. So that's a staff member physically going out and making a measurement. We'll do that during times of low flow. We coordinate with the USGS in drought years, in significantly bad drought years, to go out and try and grab some measurements on systems that don't have gauges yet. To my first part of this diatribe, I love stream flow measuring, and I would love nothing more than a big fat check from the legislature that says, I want you to gauge all the systems of the state, and I would be happy to build those gauges. To my knowledge, it hasn't happened yet, and I apologize for the tongue-in-cheekness of that, but that's about what we got so far.
Yeah, we actually fund one at Powers for.
Oh, great.
For USGS.
Yes, and I would add a little bit to that too, because as was noted earlier, 58 of the in-stream water right applications, they have not been analyzed yet because the WOBs are still being constructed. So of course, we do use the fish habitat needs based on those studies that we were talking about, but we still do take those estimates and look at that through the lens of the natural hydrograph. And so there are other data sets available that use those similar types of regional regression equations that are used in the Cooper studies. One of those is USGS stream stats. And so even for the ones where there's not an existing basin that's been delineated yet by the Water Resources Department, we still do that process on the other 58 that we applied for. And so Commissioner Main, I don't know if you were able to get my email address, but if you need me to, I can pop that back up on the screen. And then I can send you the studies. Those were attached to the applications. Those are large PDFs as well.
Okay, or you can just send it to bmain@co.coos.org.us. bmain@co.coos.org.us.
Okay.
Etc.
Quick question.
I have a,
Ivan, I'm sorry, Joshua, just real quick. So how does this impact permitted water uses that are permitted now, but not certified? Is there any difference in that, how that impacts those?
No,
No, your priority date is the date of your application. So, it can take a while to do the claim of beneficial use to finalize a permit, but you still get that priority date from the date of your application.
So specifically, one of our municipalities has a permitted water right they've not used. It's been permitted for quite some time. It's to hedge their bet for the future. And you're saying that won't impact that at all?
No, it will not. Go ahead, Ivan.
Yeah, so it's common for municipalities to have permits for long periods of time because their water rights are not subject to forfeiture on that. Other water rights that are out there have a 5-year completion deadline to get done, or they have to file an extension. Municipalities do have to file extensions periodically, and there is some nexus with in-stream water rights. I'm not clear as to what exactly that process is, but it does, and I don't know if you've got familiarity with our rules on that, but when municipalities do need to come in and file extensions, in-stream water rights are looked at. It doesn't affect the amount of the water right that the municipality holds, but I think there could be an opportunity to put additional permit conditions on that as needed.
Thanks for clarifying, Ivan.
I had a couple questions. In addition to potential impacts to development, I think you've answered those questions fairly well. Another concern here in Douglas County is impacts to agricultural use. And I know a lot of our wineries and other agricultural operations are drawing water from the Umpqua and other sources. Say a new operation went in and all of these applications have gone through and all the water is spoken for. What's the recourse for a new applicant in that case?
Yeah, so Joshua, thanks for the question. I just want to let everyone know that we've gotten past the hour mark. I'm not sure, just giving people a heads up. But regarding your systems and a new applicant, if there was no more water available, then they would have to pursue water through another source. Now, thankfully for that potential future, winery owner or hemp grower, or whatever the case may be, you do have 2 storage projects in Douglas County. So if they were able to get contract water out of the storage facilities, I believe it's Galeville and Ben Irvine, the in-stream would not affect that stored water. The stored water will have a priority date of when the reservoir was permitted and that water was stored. So that's kind of a sidebar there. For those of us in the Rogue Basin, that looks, we haven't had water available for surface water allocation during the summer months in quite some time, but there's still water available through the Bureau of Reclamation out of Applegate Lake and Lost Creek Reservoir. So it gets a little complex, but those water rights wouldn't be affected by the in-stream. And then there's some more depth to that as well, but that would probably be an opportunity for an individual who did have access to those water bodies that were below those reservoirs to do future development.
Joshua, I'd add too, above and beyond allocating new water, which frankly is going to be very difficult to do anywhere in Oregon during the dry months from surface water. We have an entire water right transfer section that deals with moving water around, and Oregon is heading in that direction. We're not making any more water anymore. There's no more supplies available out there. We can get creative, we can conserve, we can look for more efficient ways of using what we have. But fundamentally, what we have available to us from a supply perspective is all that's there. And that's changing with climate change. But the water right transfer process does allow people, basically based on the market, to get out there and find existing water rights and move them around to meet their needs. And that likely is going to be the future for most of the basins here in the state. As time goes on, folks are going to be moving water around, looking at conservation projects, piping canals, piping ditches, things like that in order to save water. And some of that saved water then can be applied to new uses. Some of it ends up in stream as a new and separate in-stream water right. So in addition to what ODFW is doing, I wanted to be clear, Oregon Parks and Recreation can apply for in-stream water rights, and DEQ can apply for in-stream water rights as well. But in addition to that, we have a number of processes that can result in stream water rights as little pieces get shaved off of existing consumptive use rights. And those aren't super common, but they're out there. Conservation groups work with landowners to come up with conservation projects, trying to get in-stream water rights back into streams where it's real critical for habitat. So there's a number of different factors going on out there that help protect these in-stream values and still provide flexibility for the out-of-stream consumptive uses there.
Yeah, add that just a little bit. You were talking about the transfer concept, and our agency has been working closely with water resources to find paths forward for mitigating for new water uses, either to overcome water availability or associated impacts to fish and wildlife from that new use. So it's not something that's going to be easy. I wouldn't say that, but that potential is there for mitigating those new uses and finding some creative ways to find new water, or not find new water, but move it around and provide for those new opportunities.
I'd read somewhere that having these water rights granted would potentially result in the necessity to do those transfers in other words, the availability isn't there, so it would force someone to go into this whatever transfer options they have. And quickly, Ivan, you said something that this water rights transfer is going to be the future. Is that something that's happening now, or something that's going to be available down the line? Are there rules or being made up around that as we speak?
No, the water right transfer process has been part of our portfolio for decades. It gets tweaked. There's still some shortcomings there we find as we go through, as people are coming up with, again, no more water available for most dry months, most of the state. So people are looking at really creative solutions, and we're like, well, how about this transfer? Well, it turns out we can't quite do that. And transfers of stored water, as an example, are a good example of one of the hurdles we're running into right now. And we're looking at legislative concepts to provide some more flexibility there. But the transfer process is very active around Oregon and has been for decades. To kind of piggyback on what Danette had mentioned earlier, off the top of my head, I know of 0 streams in Douglas County that have water available during the summer months. And by summer, I mean probably April through October, maybe even into November. And so any entity that needs a year-round water supply that wants to fire up a new business or a new agricultural operation in Douglas County is going to have to get on one of those stored water. And you guys are so lucky to have that there. You'll find that it becomes extremely valuable in the future, more so than it is now. Or they're going to, if they don't have access to stored water, they're going to have to go through the transfer process if they really want it. And those transfers, the acquisition of existing water rights may not necessarily come cheaply. You know, that's going to be this whole market-based economy that's going to be out there. So.
And one more question. Can you speak a little bit to the decision-making process that OWRD goes through? Say if someone wanted to object or file a protest, what criteria are you looking at in issuing these decisions?
Yeah, so again, I'll send the slide deck to everyone here, and it kind of goes over part of that process. Craig Kohanek is the caseworker in water rights who is and will be processing these applications. There are 30 days from the initial review to submit a comment to Craig in the Water Resource Department, kind of addressing concerns and starting a dialogue. Then should it move to a preliminary final order or a PFO, as we call it, there is a 45-day period after that date for the possibility of protesting. And that would be filed through the department as well.
Okay.
So 100 of those have gone to their 30-day comment period as of, I believe, the 19th.
Yeah.
And the other 58, again, the slide deck has the link to the public comment page, but it'll be something to just kind of keep an eye on, or, you know, talk to Susan, you know, have more in-stream water rights come out for the initial review, that kind of thing.
Okay.
I want to thank Ivan. I already got my Cooper surface water availability report. Good job.
So some things are easier to come by than others. Hey, folks, I'm sorry. I've got to cut loose for another meeting. I'm already a few minutes late.
Yeah.
I appreciate all the great questions. Jake can guide you if you do want to comment on these in-stream water rights or formally protest them. Jake or your water masters can assist with that process. And if you come up with additional questions afterwards, you can email any of us, Ann, Danette, Jake, or myself, and we'll make sure to get you the answers. Jill, I think Jake mentioned sending you the groundwater exemption statutes. That's probably the best resource we have for exemptions. We don't really have anything that says exempt groundwater uses don't need to worry about in-stream water rights. There's no rule or statute or anything like that. They're just not subject to permitting, and so there's no hurdles for them to go through.
Yeah, thanks, Ivan.
Thank you all. It was great conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I have one more thing to add for Douglas County. Based on our first rounds of in-stream water right applications back in the 90s, there was a settlement for, I think it was the North Umpqua, and I'm going to have to go back and look, but it was with Douglas County. And there were some provisions outlined in that settlement where water was set aside for various uses. So that's something I can find and send to you as well if that factors in. There's already some provisions in there. I just need to look and find it for you.
I have that, the North Umpqua settlement agreement.
Yeah,
I could find a copy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any further questions? And obviously, to Ivan's point, we're all happy to be accessible. Commissioner Kress?
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. It gives us some more food for thought. And
Copy that.
Appreciate that. We'll be reaching out some more.
Okay, copy. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for making time. Commissioners, I'd like to thank you folks for getting on the same call here. It was convenient here for ODFW, Water Resource Department, and representatives from Coos and Douglas to all kind of feel out some of these questions and address some of these issues. You know, I'm a region manager. I have Coos, Curry, Douglas, Josephine, and Jackson County. I spend most of my days knee deep in water law as opposed to the creek where I'd rather be. But there's a lot of complexity to it, and it takes a lot to unfold and unravel. And so I encourage you to reach out to myself or your water master, Susan Douthit for Coos and Douglas, if you have any kind of questions or you just need some clarification on something. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.